This summer, Instacart is bringing back your favorites from 1999 with prices from 1999. That means 90s prices on juice pouches that ought to be respected, 90s prices on box mac and cheese, and 90s prices on ham, cheese, and cracker lunches. Enjoy all those throwbacks and more at throwback prices, only through Instacart. $4.72 maximum discount per $10 of eligible items. Limit 3 offers per order. Expires September 5th while supplies last. Discount based on CPI comparison.
It's Saturday the 14th of June. I'm Jamie East, and this was a week that saw the Chancellor introduce her spending review, riots and rows in Los Angeles after immigration raids, Israel's strike at Iran, and tributes to an American music icon. Grab a cup of something hot, put up your feet, and get up to speed on the 7 biggest stories of the week. This is the Standout 7 from the Smart 7.
It's news,
But not the news. This week saw Chancellor Rachel Reeves introduce the spending review in the Commons, laying out a detailed budget for capital spending across a range of departments, including the NHS and education. There was huge pressure on Reeves because of a commitment not to raise taxes and a demand for higher spending on defence. But Technology Secretary Peter Kyle told the BBC it's not just about pounds and pence.
Money is part of how we change our country for the better. And reform, modernisation, using technology, doing things in the way that people would expect our public services to be doing in the 2020s is the other part.
On Monday, the Chancellor was busy cleaning up one of the outstanding issues from the budget and announced a U-turn on the winter fuel allowance, which will see more than 3/4 of pensioners receive the payment. It'll still be means tested, but the income level will be set at £35,000.
I was always clear that the number one priority of this government was to return stability to the economy. Our public finances are now in a better position, which means that this year we're able to pay the winter fuel payment to more pensioners, so 9 million will receive it this year.
The U-turn was mocked by Tory leader Kemi Badenoch, who called it humiliating, but with Labour concerned about poll numbers and the growth of reform, it had to be done. That didn't entirely satisfy the Labour backbenchers though, and MP Rachel Maskell was keen for more analysis.
Of course, we must recognise, however, that the energy price cap has risen by £281. I do ask that the government look at the amount people are getting, because clearly even £200 won't cover those costs.
Wednesday saw the Chancellor's first multi-year spending review, laying out budgets and plans for key departments for the next 3 years. The intention was to provide clarity for the day-to-day running of critical sectors, including the NHS, education, crime, defence and housing. She said it's part of Labour's pledge to renew Britain.
My driving purpose since I became Chancellor is to make working people in all parts of our country better off, to invest in our economy so that everyone has the opportunity to succeed after 14 years of mismanagement and decline by the party opposite.
She provided an extra £29 billion per year for the NHS, with commitments to improve the technology and develop the NHS app, along with the promised increase in defence spending and an increase in funding for social housing. Prime Minister Keir Starmer says it's not just a case of throwing money at the NHS, there needs to be real progress.
Yes, we do need to fix social care alongside the money that we're putting into the NHS. We're putting record amounts into the NHS. That's the right thing to do, and we're seeing the results.
The reaction from the opposition was predictably negative, with Tory Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride saying it was a spend now, tax later review. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch didn't seem impressed with any of Rachel Reeves' proposals.
Isn't the truth that we've got the wrong Chancellor and the wrong priorities?
No. The wrong choice they made was making her leader of the opposition.
Reform Deputy Leader Richard Tice was critical of the levels of spending too, describing it as out of control and trying to gain support for their Elon Musk-inspired approach to council budgets. The Lib Dems Treasury spokesperson Daisy Cooper was calling for a trade deal with the EU to help drive growth and warning that handing more money to the NHS without fixing social care was like pouring water into a leaky bucket.
It's been almost a year since Labour swept to power with the promise of change, but we are still not seeing the scale of ambition needed to turn the country around. We welcome the announcement of investment in the NHS, but on its own, it won't work unless the government invests in social care too.
Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, brought his ICE units to Los Angeles last Friday and triggered a weekend of protest and unrest. Trump pledged to deport 20 million people when he became president, and he's been cranking up the pressure. Immigration raids in California are unpopular and criticised by both Mayor of LA Karen Bass and Governor Gavin Newsom, but while there have been protests, the situation had remained under control. Regardless, Donald Trump ordered the National Guard into LA in what was seen as a major escalation, including protesters aiming fireworks at police. Newsom said they'll challenge Trump's National Guard deployment in court and that the escalation was calculated.
This is about authoritarian tendencies. This is about command and control. This is about power. This is about ego. My way or the highway. This is a consistent pattern of practice. It is a serious moment under the guise of immigration, but it's much deeper than that.
As protests continued, Trump escalated again by sending more National Guard and a deployment of up to 700 US Marines. Governor Newsom again called for troops to go and suggested Trump arrest him instead. And speaking on his way to the White House, Trump appeared to like that idea and took the opportunity to mock the governor, who he refers to as new scum in social posts.
I like Gavin Newsom. He's a nice guy, but he's grossly incompetent. Everybody knows. All you have to do is look at the little railroad he's building. It's about 100 times over budget. We're putting a flagpole over there. Under budget. I always do under budget.
Monday's protests were mostly peaceful, with people on the streets of Dallas too, but Democrat Senator Chris Murphy says protests aren't the issue.
Everything that's happened in the last 7 days between the fight with Elon Musk and now the deployment of the National Guard is probably also a distraction from the main story, which is that right now Donald Trump is trying to pass probably the most unpopular piece of legislation that he will attempt to move through Congress.
Trump's been looking forward to the military parade he ordered for Washington on Saturday to celebrate 200 years of the army and, of course, his birthday. He was warning on Tuesday that any protest there would be met with heavy force and continued to talk up how bad the situation would or could have been without his unwanted intervention.
We didn't send out the National Guard, and last night we gave a little additional help. You would have, Los Angeles would be burning right now. Los Angeles would be not a lot different than what you saw take place in California and Los Angeles just a little while ago.
Governor Newsom called the president a stone-cold liar and accused him of using the deployment of the National Guard and active duty Marines as theatre, and on Thursday night a judge agreed the action was illegal. There was fresh controversy that evening when US Senator Alex Padilla was bundled out of a press conference that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was holding. He was forced to the ground and handcuffed for daring to ask a question.
If this is how the Department of Homeland Security responds to a senator with a question, you can only imagine what they're doing out in the Los Angeles community and throughout California.
Life as a member of Nigel Farage's Reform Party must be exhausting. For a party which only has 5 MPs, there seems to be a never-ending series of mini-rebellions and failed coup attempts against the Brexiteerian chief. The latest to quit and then just as quickly return was chairman and donor Zia Yousaf, who exited Reform for approximately 72 hours in what appears to have been a cross wires over a burqa ban. He returned to the party with a new job title and what sounded suspiciously like a David Brent-inspired telling off from the boss.
Was I annoyed with Zia on Thursday? Oh, I wasn't exactly chuffed. But you know what? People make mistakes. And he came back to me and honestly said, look, I'm really sorry. And I've forgiven him, and we move on.
Prime Minister Keir Starmer was in Suffolk on Tuesday to announce a £14 billion investment in nuclear power. That'll kickstart the development of what's known as Sizewell C, which could create up to 10,000 jobs but take at least 10 years to complete. The aim is to bring down energy bills, improve the UK's energy independence and prepare for the increased power demands from data centres and AI. The Chancellor announced the plan at the GMB Union Congress.
This government is giving our full backing to the Sizewell C nuclear plant for the first directly state-funded nuclear power station since 1988.
The government may well have an eye on the success nuclear energy has brought France, and Energy Secretary Ed Miliband says the government's future energy strategy needs to have a multi-track approach.
Some people might say, well, why don't you just do renewables? We do want more renewables, but we also need nuclear. Electricity demand is going to double by 2050 as we move away from those insecure, volatile fossil fuels.
Back to Reform for a moment, we saw them get a brand new chairman, David Bull, who's quite a varied CV. He's a qualified doctor who's presented Newsround, appeared in a romantic comedy called Cavemen, and was once the host of ghost hunting show Most Haunted Live. But there's no judgment here on that one. That was the most ridiculous night of my life. He was also a Brexit Party MEP and a failed general election candidate for Reform. It's hard to tell whether any of that'll come in handy when dealing with Nigel, but David was busy doing the media rounds on Wednesday.
I mean, the transition has been extraordinary. On Sunday I was presenting a breakfast show, and of course then suddenly I'm chairman of Reform UK. Look, I've been involved in politics for many years. We've built that party from the ground up. Yesterday, suddenly, I wasn't really prepared for the avalanche of comments.
Thursday saw bad news for Chancellor Reeves in the wake of her spending review. The economy shrank by 0.3% in April, a disappointing reversal after positive growth numbers in Q1. The numbers, which were described as a blip by economists, probably mean that the Bank of England will hold interest rates at their next meeting rather than making any further cuts. The Chancellor was staying calm.
The numbers are disappointing, but monthly GDP numbers are particularly volatile. And if you take the 3-month period, the economy grew by 0.7%.
Analysis suggests that the contraction is probably in part at least a consequence of Donald Trump's tariff wars, which led to a £2 billion drop in exports. Tory leader Kemi Badenoch was taking a much more negative view, however.
The economy is shrinking, and it's shrinking because of choices that the government has made. The first budget went after businesses, and now we're seeing that businesses are closing, and that means that we have fewer people paying taxes and more people on the state.
This week has seen more death and chaos in Gaza as Israel's attempt to manage aid distribution through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation continues to be an absolute shambles. Sunday saw the IDF open fire on civilians at a distribution centre, killing at least 4 and wounding dozens more, bringing this week's death toll at aid centres to at least 100. Meanwhile, as Israel continues to strike what it says are Hamas command and control centres around hospitals, British surgeon Dr Victoria Rose, who's been working in those hospitals, told the BBC that doesn't match her experience.
I've never treated or seen anyone in military uniform or with a weapon. The only people I've ever seen in Gaza with military uniforms and weapons are the IDF.
There was another sign of the growing frustration with Israel among Western governments on Tuesday, as 5 countries moved to sanction 2 Israeli cabinet ministers. The sanctions will see the 2 banned from entering the UK and was part of a move carried out in coordination with Australia, Norway, Canada and New Zealand. Foreign Secretary David Lammy says the government's out of patience with the 2 far-right ministers and their incitements to violence against the Palestinian population.
Ben Gvir and Smotrich have been inciting violence against Palestinian people for months. Today we are announcing sanctions against those individuals. This has to stop.
Meanwhile, Swedish activist Greta Thunberg found herself on the way home after her failed efforts with the so-called Freedom Flotilla ended in arrest by the Israeli Navy.
They did an illegal act by kidnapping us on international waters and against our will. But that is not the real story here. The real story is that there is a genocide going on in Gaza.
Earlier on Friday morning, Israel carried out a preemptive strike on targets in Iran aimed at disrupting Iran's nuclear weapons programme. The strike, which had been telegraphed in advance, may not please Donald Trump, but the initial wave of attacks appears to have targeted both nuclear enrichment facilities and the headquarters of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. Iranian state TV says the IRGC's top commander Hossein Salami was killed in the strikes, and Israel's claiming to have killed 2 other senior generals, including top commander Brigadier General Mohammad Bagheri and key nuclear scientists. Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, vowed revenge, saying that the Zionist regime opened its dirty and bloody hand to commit a crime. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu maintains Israel had no choice, and he spoke directly to the people of Iran.
Our fight is not with you. Our fight is with the brutal dictatorship that has oppressed you for 46 years. I believe that the day of your liberation is near. And when that happens, the great friendship between our 2 ancient peoples will flourish once again.
Still to come on the Standout 7 in association with Metro, Andy Murray faces a tricky opponent, and we pay tribute to an American music icon. Right after this.
This is a paid advertisement from Asda. You know those weeknights where everything feels like a rush? Homework to finish, bath time chaos, kids running riot, and somehow you've still got to make dinner too. It's the classic parenting juggle. Well, this is where Joe Wicks and Asda come in as the heroes we didn't know we needed. Joe's teamed up with Asda to create quick, easy, budget-friendly meal ideas that are delicious. Think sticky chicken noodles, Mexican meatball tray bakes, creamy salmon pasta, Real food that's quick to rustle up, tasty and budget friendly. Because sometimes the biggest win of the day is getting the whole family fed and still having 5 minutes to yourself before bedtime negotiations begin. Whether you're feeding fussy toddlers or grumpy teenagers, Joe Wick's meal picks take the stress out of dinner time. Search Joe Wick's meal picks at asda.com now to see what your lot will love. That's Asda price.
Welcome back.
Thursday saw a dramatic and tragic event flash across screens worldwide. Air India flight AI-171 departed from India's Ahmedabad airport heading for London Gatwick, but shortly after takeoff and before it had even fully begun to climb, crashed and burst into flames into a populated area, and authorities say over 260 people were killed. Foreign Secretary David Lammy was quick to offer condolences and support to the families of the 52 Britons on board.
My thoughts, and I'm sure those of the entire House, are with those who've been affected by the tragic plane crash. The FCDO is working urgently with local authorities to support British nationals and their families.
Incredibly, it appears one Brit, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh, who was in seat 11A, survived the crash and was even able to walk away from it. The plane involved was a Boeing Dreamliner, which have a good safety record, and Air India CEO Campbell Wilson promised to thoroughly investigate what went wrong.
I would like to express our deep sorrow about this event. This is a difficult day for all of us at Air India, and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, their families and loved ones.
Andy Murray was back on a tennis court on Monday at the Queen's Club, but not to play tennis. Instead, he was officially opening the centre court, which has been renamed in his honour. The Queen's Club tournament runs for the next 2 weeks as a warm-up to Wimbledon, and for the first time since 1973, there's a women's event as well as the men's. Goodness me. Andy says his tennis is diabolical these days as he takes a well-deserved rest from the racket. He sat down with Claire Boulding to reveal his new passion, playing chess with his son.
It's difficult losing to a 5-year-old when in the middle of the game he's asking you to come and wipe his bum. Essentially, he's going to the toilet in the middle of the game, and then he comes back and is beating me at chess. It's humbling that for my intelligence.
Wednesday saw the death announced of one of the greats of 20th century music, Brian Wilson, who was aged 82. He was the co-creator, singer, songwriter and arranger of the Beach Boys and was the last surviving member of the Wilson brothers who were at the heart of the group. The Beach Boys rivaled the Beatles in the 60s as a creative pop powerhouse with hit after hit, and in Pet Sounds what is widely regarded as one of the best albums ever made. Tributes poured in for the music business, including Bob Dylan, Ronnie Wood, Mick Fleetwood and Questlove, who said Wilson could make art out of inexpressible sadness. Brian spoke to Beatles producer George Martin back in 1997 about his creative process and his belief that great music came from a higher power. Rest in peace, Brian.
They come from down deep in my soul, way deep in my soul. There's this music that's there that wants to blow right out of my chest, and like it just totally blew out. Music came out of my chest.
You've been listening to The Smart 7. We'll be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. Hit that follow button and have a great day. Give us 7 minutes and we'll give you the world.
Did you know that foreign investors are quietly funding lawsuits in American courts through a practice called third-party litigation funding? Shadowy overseas funders are paying to sue American companies in our courts, and they don't pay a dime in U.S. taxes if there is an award or settlement. They profit tax-free from our legal system, while U.S. companies are tied up in court, and American families pay the price, to the tune of $5,000 a year. But there is a solution. A new proposal before Congress would close this loophole and ensure these foreign investors pay taxes, just like the actual plaintiffs have to. It's a common-sense move that discourages frivolous and abusive lawsuits and redirects resources back into American jobs, innovation, and growth. Only President Trump and congressional Republicans can deliver this win for America and hold these foreign investors accountable. Contact your lawmakers today and demand they take a stand to end foreign-funded litigation abuse.